Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk today about exercise, type 1 diabetes, Omnipod 5, and the mistakes that I made today in my activity and how you can learn from it. So I'm going to just give you some background and then I'll share some of the graphs and I'll talk through where I gave myself insulin and where I screwed up. And I think it can be a helpful lesson because normally I have no issues being super active and I continue to be along with my type 1 diagnosis. And so sometimes you make mistakes and that's okay. So I want to outline some of this stuff so that hopefully it can help you avoid some of these issues in the future. So just for some context, I was working today until about 4:15. I had eaten, so the first mistake that I made, and I'll show you this in graphs, but I had eaten, I think around 3 something, maybe a little bit before that, but I bolus for about 60 carbs. And so long story short, when I went into my workout, I had quite a bit more insulin on board than I normally do. I think I normally try to have 1 unit or less when I start an exercise class or routine or whatever. Today, I think I had about 2.5 units on board. Plus, I did 2 workout classes rather than one, and then I golfed. So normally I do F45 training, which is HIIT training, so high intensity interval training, which means it's like it can be light to heavy weights, but it's typically done at a fast pace, so there's not much rest in between. And so you can really burn through your sugar, and I typically do. The difference today was that I actually did 2 classes. So I did a lower body class and I did an upper body class. So 90 minutes of exercise followed by going golfing. And I'll admit that I was pretty lazy and I took a cart, but there was still a lot of walking. And so ultimately, I did a lot of exercise and a lot of activity, and I did not have sufficient food in my system either before or during any of that stuff. And I kept crashing and then coming back up and then crashing and coming back up. And I want to walk through that so I can talk through changes that I would make next time and also what I'm going to do for the rest of this night so that I don't eat a ton of food and then skyrocket overnight and then screw up my next day. So with that, let me share my screen. I'll just show you some of the graphs. Okay, here are just 2 screenshots that I had in the thumbnail, and they highlight not the peak of my low, but then they also show the rebound. So this graph is a screenshot that I took when I was at 66, but if you look over to the left, you can see that it was actually a little bit lower. So I got down to, I think it was like 48 today, and I actually did feel pretty crappy. I don't normally get that low, and I get the jittery fingers and sort of like racing thoughts, and so you can see here that this is like at the conclusion of my exercise, so right around like 5:30. And so at this point, I took a whole bunch of sugar, came back up again, and then I went to the golf course. So here you can see I'm not eating enough and I'm kind of going along, and then I sink down again. And then if we jump over to this graph, you'll see that eventually I got annoyed and I took a bunch of glucose and I skyrocketed up. So I want to go to, this is gluco. This shows that same time period, but then it also shows the carbs that I ate and the insulin that I took and stuff. So here you can see 60. And so this was, I guess it was lunch. No, this is what it was. So 3:46, this is my first mistake. I knew I was going to be exercising at about 4:15 or something like that. I would never normally eat at this time. So this was a huge mistake. So I took the insulin for 60 carbs, and it looks like I gave myself 3.5 units. So that's a real bonehead move. Normally, you don't want to go into exercise right after a meal. Now, a walk or something low intensity right after you've worked out or right after you've eaten is perfectly fine, and that's actually a good thing. But when you are going to do something as intense as I was doing today, you would never want to eat this kind of a meal or take this much insulin before it. So the first change that I would make is if I was going to eat at this time, I would either have less carbs overall, or I wouldn't dose for all of them. So if I do this again, I ate the same meal, I would definitely dose probably for 20 grams of carbs, which would maybe equal about 1 unit of insulin, if that. Now, when you do that, you have to accept the fact that you're taking less insulin for that meal. And so it's very likely that you're going to go up following that meal because you didn't give yourself enough insulin. So you have to trust that the exercise that you're going to do afterwards is going to bring you back down. And normally it does, but I don't know why I did this today. I was just thick-headed, so whatever. And then anyway, you can see here. So like here, I'm in my exercise routine and I am crashing. I'm eating a ton of sugar because I bring glucose tablets with me to the classes, but I have so much insulin in me that it's not really helping. And so you can see here, I get down to 48. Um, Now at this point, I was done with my workout and um, I had a bunch of sugar in me already, but I also knew that I needed something with protein. So I had a protein bar and an apple because typically with a low, at least for me, I need something substantial to reverse the low and then to also sustain it so that I don't come back down again. So I made another mistake here. And that mistake was when I ate that stuff, I actually gave myself more insulin. So I'm down here, I'm starting to come up. So I can see that I'm sort of coming up quickly. So you see it's 48, 61, 81. And so I'm thinking to myself at this point, crap, like all of the sugar that I took is now hitting me and I'm going to be up at, 180 in 2 seconds. And so I ate what I bolused for was 35 grams of carbs and I guess another 2.4 units of insulin. So this was mistake number two. If I had to do this again, what I need to tell myself is that despite the fact that my blood sugar is going up very quickly, I still exercised for 90 minutes previously, and I know I'm going to be very insulin sensitive. And it's likely that the quick rise that I'm seeing from the glucose tablets is not going to be sustained. Normally, my body just processes sugar extremely well after that intensive a workout, and so I wouldn't give myself this much insulin. In fact, I would maybe not even bolus for the food that I ate here. So this is mistake number two. So to backtrack, mistake number one, taking way too much insulin before I worked out. And then working out 2 classes right after that was particularly stupid. And then once I started to rebound, taking a relatively aggressive additional dose of insulin for the snack that I had was also silly because you'll see here, I get back up only to about 140, and then now I'm on the golf course at this point. So I'm being active and I'm coming back down pretty harshly again. So I get back down to 66. And it looks like at this point, again, I think I was sick of coming back low. So I think I took around like 6 glucose tablets. And you can see here it goes from 66 to 80 to 101, 122. And I feel like if anybody's ever seen this sort of space in between their graphs on the Dexcom, you typically can understand or you can, I think, relate to the thought that you might just keep going in that direction forever and you have to get aggressive to stop it. And so I wasn't necessarily aggressive, but I did take another 0.5 units of insulin. And then you can see here, I started to actually come back down yet again. Now, thankfully, as I look right now, I'm actually back at like 120. So I'm in a good range now. But again, these are some of the nuances that you have to kind of think about when you have type 1 and you want to be active. I don't believe that you need to restrict yourself at all. And I don't believe that you need to avoid food. But I do think that you should consider the amount of insulin that you're taking in preparation for what you're going to do. So again, taking less insulin just before my workout, and then also taking less insulin when I'm having that meal following the workout. So these were pretty bad mistakes for me. I don't normally do this bad. And so I wanted to highlight just what that can do. And again, I think this is a helpful learning opportunity for anybody who might be seeing this because, I think you call this like the roller coaster. I was on the blood sugar roller coaster because I was coming up, but it wasn't a real coming up or high. And then I would come back crashing down again. And then also I'm feeding my body with sugar. And so you don't really want to do either of those things. Now, a couple of other things as it relates specifically to the Omnipod 5. Again, not that they're correct things, but they're things that I did, and I think it can be helpful to understand this, is that when I took this insulin here, so these 2.4 units, when I took them at about 81, when I was coming from 81 to 122, with the Omnipod 5, if you're using the bolus calculator, if it sees like a very aggressive trend in one direction or the other, it's going to try to correct for that in your dosage. So when I put in 35 grams of carbs, it saw that I was going from 81 to 122, and it thinks the same thing that I did, which is that, oh crap, this guy might be going up high, so let's give him more insulin or be more aggressive. Now, in some cases, that's good. I actually like that in a lot of cases because I would prefer to almost have an upward trend before I bolus so that I'm going to get more insulin rather than, sometimes if you're taking insulin on the Omnipod 5, when you're already trending down, it's going to give you such a small amount that you're going to go high afterwards almost all the time. But in this case, I actually needed to override it in the opposite way. So I should have seen this number and said to myself, it doesn't know that I just exercised for 90 minutes or that I'm going to be active again after this. So I need to actually not take a full dose. So those are just some considerations with the Omnipod 5 specifically if you're using automated mode and the bolus calculator. So those are a couple things that just happened in terms of the evening that I could have done better. And hopefully if you run into the situation, you consider these things as well. Now, the other thing to be mindful of is that oftentimes for me, and I don't know about you guys, but if you've had sort of a night where you were low a lot, when you eventually get to eat a substantial meal, which is what I needed to do because, to get off the roller coaster, a lot of times I need protein. I need something substantial so that I'm not just giving, fast acting sugar. The mistake that can be made sometimes is that you're so sick of being low that you end up eating, a huge meal and taking less insulin than you should for dinner. And then you go high all night. And so I've had many instances where I've had this sort of a day and then I don't take enough insulin because I'm sick of taking too much insulin. And then I'm riding at 190 all night. And I feel like crap the next day. And I've become a little bit insulin resistant. And so, a couple things. You don't want to just get super aggressive because then you'll just be back on this roller coaster again. But you also don't want to take too little and get yourself stuck high. So ultimately, what I would suggest is that you take a reasonable amount of insulin for dinner, but you do it in an hour that you're going to be up long enough so that that food is going to process and you're going to sort of see where you're at in a stable way before you go to sleep. I definitely would not have like a late dinner on a day like this because I want to be mindful of what's happening and make sure that I can get myself back to an even level with very little insulin in my system and very little food in my system before I go to sleep. And that will set me up for success overnight and for the next day. And again, these are just normal life situations that I think can be tricky when you have type 1. And so I could have done a much better job with what I just described today. I will do that the next time. And hopefully this is helpful for anybody that has been experiencing something similar. So I would encourage everybody to be just as active as you want, but just be mindful of insulin and how you're using it and the timing of your insulin and your food and all that. So I hope this was helpful and I'll talk to you all soon.